Hello, my name is Ben Kemp. I'm the operations manager at Grant Cottage Historic Site, and since we are doing a Battle of the Hats this week, I thought I would show you some of my hats in my collection that I use for different activities that we host at the historic site. Some of them are original and some of them are reproduction. So we had the winner of the hat contest in the military category was the slouch hat. So officers in the Civil War would have to buy their own equipment, uniforms and headgear, and a lot of them chose the slouch hat. It offered protection from the sun and it was a little lighter than some of the other options available in the summertime. So we'll try that on there. And there would be typically a hat cord which helps show rank, and sometimes a patch would be added as well depending on the desires of the officer. So that was a common officer's hat. Now when I portray a common soldier, I'll use what's called a forage hat, and this was what many of the common soldiers in the Civil War, the privates, lower ranking soldiers, would have worn. And it offered some protection from the sun. It has a small brim here made out of leather, and the rest of it's made out of wool. And sometimes towards the later part of the war especially, you would have some sort of symbol to let the officers know if you were separated from your regiment. It would allow them to identify which part of the army you were from. So we'll move on into the civilian hats, and the civilian hat that won our contest was a top hat. It was a light gray top hat, but we have a period top hat. These two were reproductions that I showed you for Civil War hats. This is an original 1880s top hat, and it's made with silk. Originally they were made with beaver, actual beaver hair or pelts, but towards the middle of the 19th century the beaver was not as prevalent and it was harder to get, so they started making them out of silk. They still referred to them as beaver hats though, as a term. Now we can see a maker's mark inside. There's actually a vent hole up inside here to vent the hot air, because men would wear hats customarily throughout the day, every day. It was custom to always wear a hat. So it was rather uncommon to see a man without a hat on in that period. So this is an original 1880s top hat. So we see that. Now there was other hats that were a little bit lower, and we saw some of the lower hats in our contest. And one of the ones we really didn't go through because we don't have a picture of Grant wearing one is a derby hat. This is a tall derby hat. They had ones that were slightly shorter. The top was shorter. And this was a very popular hat in the second half of the 19th century, all the way into the early 20th century. So the derby hat. We have some pictures of the Grant family on the porch of Grant Cottage, and they are wearing a variety of hats, including the derby hat, and Grant is wearing his top hat. A top hat that we in fact have in the collection in Grant Cottage, and we're going to show you a video of that. While at Grant Cottage, Grant used a couple of different hats. We know that when he was cold and sitting on the porch, he would use a winter hat, a knit hat, but at other times he wore the customary hat, which was presentable for a man of his time, which was a top hat, as well as a suit. The top hat he wore to within days of his death is now kept inside the cottage in a case where visitors can see it, and it is a typical silk, what they would have called beaver top hat of its time, and is a treasured relic of the historic site. Women would also wear head coverings most all the time. It was very customary, and they would have bonnets, and in the summer they may wear a low summer hat as well, something made out of straw like this one. This is reproduction, but that's something that women would have worn. I don't have a lot of women's hats available to show you, but we also have a very necessary item, which is a hat box. So hat boxes would have been absolutely necessary, because these hats were subject to being crushed or something of that kind. So they would put them in these harder boxes to store and to ship them or to travel with them. Modern hats, like the one we have here, the Friends of Grant Cottage, still incorporate the sun blocking technologies that we saw in the brims of some of the earlier hats. Obviously, style was very important in hats throughout history, and many of the styles that America adopted did come from European fashions, including the military as well as the civilian fashions for both men and women. There are certain occasions where you may still take a historic hat and wear it, whether it be a costume party, a historical reenactment, or maybe even a fancy dinner. So these are some of the hats I wanted to share with you. Feel free to make comments. Feel free to share your own pictures and your own historical hats that you may have in your collection. We'd love to see them. And thanks for taking part in this Battle of the Hats this week and helping us to crown some military and civilian hats and learn a little bit more about historic hats. So thanks so much, and visit us at www.grantcottage.org for more information about our historic site.